Hi everyone, it's Professor Beery again. And I've got Lainey here with me again. She's going to be chewing a bone in the background. In the last video, we talked about some kind of procedural issues that you want to have in your mental checklist as you look at the federal constitutional law question that we know is coming on the Florida bar exam in October 2020. Because the Florida Board of Bar Examiners has told us they're going to test federal constitutional law. The two issues we talked about last time were the 11th Amendment and standing, not necessarily in that order, but you always want to check for those when you have a common law question. And I'm going to talk in this short video about one more not really a substantive issue, but a threshold issue that you want to look for. Again, add it to your mental checklist when you're looking at a common law question, and that is the issue of state action. And this is very easy to test. You throw this little curveball at you, where the question is whether there's a constitutional violation, and you look at the person or entity that's being sued, and you see that technically it's a private person or a private entity, private corporation, association, organization, something like that. And the examiners can kind of throw a fact pattern at you where they say, this association is heavily regulated by the state or the city, some governmental entity. Try to kind of lead you into thinking that it's the government itself, when in fact it's something that's just entangled with the government or regulated by the government. Let me start with the general principle. Err on the side, first of all, recognize it. You have to spot the issue, right? When there's somebody being sued who's technically a private actor, you have to be able to say, okay, wait a minute, this is a state action problem. First of all, err on the side of saying that the private actor is not a state actor. Now, I always recommend that you cite to the text of the Constitution when you're answering one of these questions. When you're talking about state action, your citation is to the entire U.S. Constitution, which addresses itself to the government, with the possible exception of the 13th Amendment, which bans slavery or involuntary servitude anywhere in the United States. But don't worry about that. I mean, the general proposition is you would say the entire Constitution, generally speaking, okay, let's hedge, addresses itself to the government. It's not there to regulate private conduct. So then again, when you have a fact pattern where you have a technically private organization, institution, whatever the case may be, that's being sued, you would identify that as a private entity, and say that therefore the general rule is, and the general conclusion would be, that there is no constitutional violation, be it it could be a procedural due process case, could be an equal protection case, could be a First Amendment case. None of those things applies to private conduct. So here's where you go from there. Remember that there are very few instances in which a court will say that a technically private actor will be imputed with state action. I would know those terms. And those would be, first of all, when the private actor is performing a traditionally exclusive governmental function. Emphasis on exclusive. That's where most of your analysis would fall, right? If it's a private school or a private utility, a trash collection company, something like that, you'd have to say, look, I mean, maybe the government does that, but exclusive means that traditionally it has been only the government that does that. So you're talking there about things like police, maybe some other first responders, running court systems, right? We're talking about stuff that prisons, okay, running prisons, that traditionally only the government has done in this country. So if a private actor is performing one of those functions, you could have a court saying we're going to call it a state actor. The second type of case would be where you're asking a court, which obviously is a state actor, to enforce a private contract that, were the state to perform the contract itself, would be unconstitutional. And usually you're talking here about a contract, think the Shelley case, a contract that requires discrimination. Obviously, discrimination, if undertaken by the government, is an equal protection violation. So you can, again, even if it's a technically private contract, so you've got private parties to the lawsuit, still a court cannot enforce a private contract that would involve the state in causing an equal protection violation. The third thing you would want to look at would be entanglement or the relationship between the private entity and the government. You can make the argument, as I've said in Common Law 1, this is a weak argument, you can make it, that because an entity is so thoroughly regulated, in every aspect of its operations by the government, that they're essentially doing only what the government tells them to do or allows them to do, and they should be regarded as a governmental entity. You can make that argument, but again, you should be aware that that usually will get you not very far in front of a federal court. Finally, I would not necessarily expect this to be tested, but there is that string of cases from the Supreme Court holding that major political parties or subdivisions of major political parties may be regarded as state actors when they discriminate in their primary elections. So again, watch out. Make sure that when you see a common law question, that you go through your mental checklist, and one of the things you want to check is, do we have a state actor here? If the fact pattern says state A, I wouldn't spend a lot of time talking about state action. If the fact pattern says you're challenging Congress, I wouldn't spend a lot of time talking about state action. So again, when you would spend a lot of time talking about it and you would stop and say, oh, here we go, this is an issue, is when you see a technically private entity that's being sued in a constitutional case. Hope that helps, and we'll be back to talk more substance. The next video is going to be about the Commerce Clause.